Recently, Caleb Plant responded about how he would fight Canelo, saying that even though he doesn't have a style like Floyd Mayweather or like Errol Lara, who gave Canelo problems, he has similar, if not better, athleticism than Floyd. And he believes that with his IQ, his ring IQ that he also has and brings to the table, he will be able to be victorious over Canelo Alvarez. Now, a lot of people don't believe Caleb Plant, but I do believe him. I also believe that Caleb Plant comes from the same school of thought, like a Floyd Mayweather, a Canelo Alvarez, a Andre Ward. He's more of a what we call, and as the topic says, a calculated fighter. Calculated fighters, they fight uh, based on before they even enter into the actual fight. They're preparing themselves, sharpening their tools, yes, but they also are very deliberate in how they proceed with every step of their development. We call it calculated moves. When is the right time to face a fighter? Once you're facing the fighter, what kind of preparation is necessary to stay at the top level? Canelo, Andre Ward, Floyd Mayweather, Caleb Plant have been very deliberate in how they conduct themselves, how they prepare themselves, how they stay in shape, how they train. Calculated fighters are smart fighters. Caleb Plant's a very smart fighter. He doesn't have the experience, but he's a very smart fighter. They work on angles, the angles of approach, the angles of attack. They work on timing, not just in throwing punches, but also in movement around the ring. They're fighters that generally are very good at moving in the ring. The movement in the ring is a very important thing. Movement is not just moving all around the ring. No, movement in the ring is where you place your body in space so that you can get the optimal angle of attack while also having reduced to make it a minimal angle of opening for your opponent to hit you. So that's the kind of fighter that Caleb Plant is. He's a smart fighter, and he understands range. He understands distance. He understands counters. He understands leads. He understands footwork, where in the ring you should be, and at what sector, what how to deal with this style of fighter. Whether it's a fighter that closes down the ring, which a fighter that cuts off the ring, etc. So those are calculated fighters. Let me talk a little bit about, because I want to talk about these three great fighters. We have Andre Ward, we have Canelo Alvarez, we have Floyd Mayweather. I'm hearing talks about how Timothy Bradley saying how Andre Ward is preparing for, if Canelo beats Caleb Plant, he's preparing for if possible Canelo calling him out and him being able to answer the call. Um, First of all, Andre Ward, the mindset of Andre Ward is somebody who's well prepared for a fight. Andre Ward's not going to go in a fight if he's not well prepared for it. Floyd Mayweather is the same thing. So these kinds of fighters are not like James Toney. They're not like a Roy Jones Jr. They're not like any other exceptional fighter you can think of, Sugar Ray Leonard, etc. And I want to talk a little bit about calculated fighters. Now, let me try and separate levels in boxing by talking first about Sugar Ray Leonard versus Terry Norris. Sugar Ray Leonard versus Terry Norris. And I will juxtapose it with Floyd Mayweather versus uh, Marcos Maidana, for example. Okay. Um, and why I'm going to do that is because I want to get a young, hot-blooded fighter versus an old veteran. That's the idea. And I want to show you what the difference is between calculated fighting and fighting. Okay, so Sugar Ray Leonard was a smart fighter. All right, a very smart fighter. He tried to use psychological warfare on his opponents, but in a very pleasant way, sort of subvert them. And Sugar Ray Leonard was a beast in the ring. He was known for his beastly, getting the knockout and stopping guys and doing the unthinkable. Reminds me a little bit of Manny Pacquiao. But Sugar Ray Leonard's go-to, if he couldn't outsmart you, if he couldn't outthink you, he was going to bang with you. He was going to brawl with you. That was his go-to. I think that's the thing that made Sugar Ray Leonard, and a lot of people think he was a very great fighter, because Sugar Ray Leonard, if he couldn't, if he couldn't box you, if he couldn't outplay you, he was going to bang. And Sugar Ray Leonard's go-to is to bang it out instead of ride it out. If you think about it, Sugar Ray Leonard was more of an offensive fighter than he was a defensive fighter. All right, so why am I saying this? I'm saying this because against Terry Norris, being, I think he was 34 years of age or 35 years of age at the time, Sugar Ray Leonard needed to understand that he needed to fight in a very calculated way against a young, strong, in his prime, vicious Terry Norris, who's known as Terrible Terry Norris. And the game plan Sugar Ray Leonard should have had against Terry Norris, he did not have that game plan, but would have been to attack Terry Norris's body, steal shots where he could, and really have a very tight defense against the younger fighter. Because what you want to do with a younger, stronger, faster fighter who also is textbook, he knows fundamentals of boxing, is you want to wear him down. You have to take away some of that youth from him. You have to take away some of that energy from him. And that means being strategic and calculated in how you fight him. Now, what I'm telling you is the game plan. Now, a game plan, execution of a game plan, and telling you the game plan is two different things. So the game plan to fight a fighter like a Terry Norris would have been to steal shots to the body. Notice I said steal shots to the body. You got to hit him when he's not really thinking. When he's in the middle of throwing 4 or 5 punch combination, you should be able to counter him with a body shot, 1 body shot or 2 body shots. Not trying to throw combinations with him, not trying to engage in brawls with him, not trying to bang it out with him, not trying to go toe-to-toe with him. That's stupid. You're smarter, you're older, you're wiser. You pick your shots. You pick your angles. He will be trying to push the pace on you because you're older. He's going to try to tire you out by being relentless. But you got to be able to pick those spots in between all of that. Keep your cool. Keep what we call, you have to be able to keep your composure in the midst of that storm and stay very calm and pick your shots. So I'm going to talk about Floyd Mayweather versus Marcos Maidana, the first fight. And the thing with Mayweather, Marcos Maidana came very hard on Mayweather. It was very awkward. Started really banging him in the head and stuff, caught him in awkward places. And Mayweather kept his composure, kept his defense tight, and countered Marcos Maidana. He started going toe-to-toe sort of off the ropes. And Mayweather won that battle because Mayweather was being very calculated against Marcos Maidana. He was targeting his body. He knew he couldn't target Marcos Maidana's head, and Marcos Maidana have a hard head. So he went to the body mostly, and every now and then he'd come up top and hit him to the head. And he was able to get Marcos Maidana off of him in the very first round, where Marcos Maidana was swarming him and trying to rough him up and do everything possible. But Mayweather kept his defense tight and was able to sneak in and slip shots in and keep on going to Marcos Maidana's breadbasket. And throughout the fight, Floyd Mayweather kept on attacking Marcos Maidana's body, and he would do it, and then he'd have these flashy headshots, but most of the time he attacked Marcos Maidana's body. He was going for body work, body shots. He knew he couldn't throw as many shots as Marcos Maidana was, but he knew he could wear him down and tire him out that way. I say this because the difference between Mayweather and a Sugar Ray Leonard, both were around about the same age. Actually, Mayweather was older than Sugar Ray Leonard at that point in time, was that Mayweather knew that he may not be as fast as Marcos Maidana, or Marcos Maidana was a little bit faster at times, throwing with, especially with combinations. But he can make his shots count on Marcos Maidana, especially the body shots. Now, Sugar Ray Leonard, when he was fighting Terry Norris, Sugar Ray Leonard always had this tendency to want to brawl or mix up shots. So initially, he threw jabs to Terry Norris's head. He stole some shots to the body. But somewhere around, I think it was the middle of the second round, he started trying to trade with Terry Norris. He tried to put one or two or three or four punches together. And this is where Sugar Ray Leonard should have understood that he's older now and he needs to sharpshoot more and he needs to use certain footwork and certain angles to protect himself because I mean, besides squaring up on blocking shots, which is not always a good idea, you need to sometimes move around the ring and use specific footwork so the Terry Norris would go down the wrong lines. He didn't do that. He didn't use pivot work. He didn't use that kind of thing. So he tried to fight his way out of the situation. And that's where Terry Norris was able to drop him twice and beat him up some, even though it was still competitive and tactical and slowed down some. And he was actually able to put some punishment on Terry Norris later on. He had been dropped twice and he was behind on the scorecards and he had to come back from behind. So that's why I said calculated fighters. Okay? Mayweather's a very calculated fighter. Similarly, Canelo and Andre Ward are very calculated fighters. And Andre Ward, like Mayweather, is in tip-top shape, always a perfectionist. And what I'm trying to say is when you're older than a guy who may be younger, stronger, faster than you have to be very calculated, very deliberate about what it is you're trying to do. And then you need to know how you're going to go about doing that. And that's the huge separation right there I just spoke about between Floyd Mayweather and Sugar Ray Leonard. And that's one of the major reasons why Floyd would beat Sugar Ray Leonard's ass anytime in history. It didn't matter if Sugar Ray Leonard was in his prime or not. Sugar Ray Leonard tends to want to brawl. He tends to want to fight. That's what made him exciting. That's what made his fights exciting. But because of that, he tends to take a lot more punishment than he should, which is his demise. The same thing he tried to do with Hector Camacho and got caught. Okay, and that's why he got stopped. You cannot do that in boxing. It's not just a shootout. You must be calculated. You must understand who it is you're facing. You must understand when you get in that ring that you need to find ways to know what this person does very, very well and what they don't do very, very well, and then take what they don't do very well away from them so that you can exploit what they don't do very, very well. They must be able to resort to something else. You must be able to disable them and take away their weapons, use their weapons against them. And that's calculated fighting. So when people say, well, James Toney would beat Canelo Alvarez, I understand why he would say that. James Toney faced some great Hall of Fame fighters, and he's faced great fighters all around. Oh, James Toney would beat Andre Ward. I'm going to say this right now. James Toney ain't beating Andre Ward. Andre Ward is too calculated a fighter for James Toney to beat him. In fact, I'm going to go as far as to say Roy Jones Jr. ain't beating Andre Ward because Roy Jones Jr. went off of his physical giftedness, his speed, his quickness. He was smart too, a smart fighter, but he was not on Andre Ward's level. Andre Ward didn't just stay undefeated since he was 12 years old by chance. He's a guy that was always is well prepared for what he has to face. And he's very calculated in how he proceeds. It's chess, not checkers. He's not looking to win by landing one or two moves on you and feel good about himself. No. And so I just think that the mindset of an Andre Ward, if Andre Ward comes back into boxing, he's coming back to win. He's not coming back, into boxing by chance. So if Andre Ward was to ever come back into boxing, Canelo was to ever call out Andre Ward, which would be a stupid thing for Canelo to do. But if he would ever call out Andre Ward would go into that fight and beat Canelo. He would beat him and beat him soundly. On the inside, too. And on the outside. He would beat him. Comprehensively beat Canelo because Andre Ward's a guy that prepares for fights. He's a very intentional fighter. He's a very calculated fighter. And I want to talk a little bit more about calculated fighters, as this week goes along. Similarly, I think Andre Ward would beat James Toney. James Toney was never a calculated fighter. And another thing I want people to understand, and why I say this, not to put down James Toney, but I really want to get this across to people. James Toney never tried to improve his boxing throughout the career. He had certain gifts, he had certain skill sets, but repeatedly through his career, he got dropped by punches that meant that he either pivoted out the way or he respected distance and he took a step back. And he always repeatedly did that. Showed that that flaw, he never worked on it. He never understood why he kept getting dropped. He relied on his skills. James Sterling was a guy that loved to spar. He loved to spar a lot. He loved to fight. But when it comes to learning new things and developing his craft and developing his game plan, he did not do that. He tried to develop it by simply fighting. But you have to work on elements of your game plan. Again, when I look at Caleb Plant, when I look at Canelo, Canelo's still learning, still growing, and he's only 30 years of age. When I think of Floyd, constantly perfecting the craft, always looking for the pursuit of perfection, where to place the punches. He had people who specifically worked on his balance. He had people who specifically worked on punch placement. He had people who worked specifically on defense. To perfect his craft, to keep on repeating it, repetition, and even learning new things and trying new things, not just in terms of boxing, but in terms of medications, in terms of supplements, in terms of so many things he was trying. Always curious, always trying to learn something, always humble enough to try to learn something. Same thing with Andre Ward. You can't stay at the top in boxing today if you don't push the boundaries constantly, not only for yourself, but also in terms of the sport, in terms of medications and other things in your team. That also helps you along. You have to be able to boost your team, make your team want to go better, want to explore new things. And I just feel like Caleb Plant has people around him like that. I also think that the dedication and the discipline that Caleb Plant has really is going to order well for him in the future. I know Canelo is similarly disciplined now, but the point is that Caleb Plant versus Canelo Alvarez, you're talking about two calculated fighters. And that's why I think that the fight is going to be even better than a Danny Jacobs versus Canelo Alvarez. I think Caleb Plant's going to hold his own against Canelo, just as Danny Jacobs did. I think he's going to do very, very, very well. Very, very, very well. Because he's a very calculated fighter. And you need to have calculated fighters. Now, Dimitri Bevo is also a calculated fighter. But once again, and very dedicated, but once again, Dimitri Bevo is somewhat limited by he fights mostly at mid-range. He's not really an outboxer. He's more into counters. But Caleb Plant, he can fight at long range. He can fight on the inside. He can fight at mid-range. He has that versatility. And once he knows where to body position himself, where to position his body in space, it makes a tremendous difference. Okay, gotta go out and so I like to talk about calculated fighters. I like to talk about calculated fighters because that's a whole other level of boxing. And I think a lot of people don't really talk about this level of boxing much. Again, a lot of people focus on power and, quickness and speed, and they focus on ferocity of a fighter. And I mean, these things are very attractive when it comes to entertainment. But when you're talking about top tier fighters, okay, no, so we saw Floyd versus Manny Pacquiao. I'm gonna show. It's a point I'm making here. So Floyd versus Pacquiao. Floyd, the game plan was to keep Pacquiao at range, keep him on the outside, right, with the jab and the right hand. Keep him on the outside so you can see him carefully and make him have to come in on you and push him back using those tools, right? Now, when you think about it, Jeff Horn also, he came in and his game plan was to make it ugly, tie up Pacquiao, rough him up on the inside, make it rough and rugged, and you could win the fight because it'd be ugly fight, but you could get the win that way. You can get some of your shots in. All right. Besides Jeff Horn and Floyd Mayweather, who has beaten Pacquiao? No one, right? No one. Okay. But is it that these people who fought Pacquiao didn't try the same strategies that Floyd did and Jeff Horn did? Absolutely, they tried. Adrian Broner, he tried to do exactly what Floyd was doing. He tried to keep Pacquiao at the end of his stick. He tried to circle him clockwise. He tried to draw him in to counter him. He tried those things. But with very
minimal success than what Floyd had. Floyd was in control of Pacquiao, whereas Broner just couldn't get it done. And why he couldn't get it done was because it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to execute it. And you have to have the seasoned composure. You got to have the seasoned timing. You have to have the seasoned feints that go along with it. You have to be able to circle the right way and stick with that. It must come naturally to you. And Broner broke all those rules. Every time he broke the rule, Pacquiao take advantage of it. And Pacquiao took over the momentum because guess what? Pacquiao was the one that was first. You have to be first. If you want to dictate, you got to be first. You can't be second. Because if you're second, you're going to be reacting. And the other guy's going to be dictating. That's boxing, right? So when Broner started to react instead of dictate, because he thought to react would mean that now he reacts so he could counter. But it doesn't work like that. If you look at the first round of Mayweather versus Pacquiao, which is actually on Showtime here on YouTube, you'll see Mayweather wasn't looking for Pacquiao to react. He took the fight to Pacquiao from the opening bell. He was actually walking down Pacquiao and throwing his jab and throwing his right hand. Right, whether he hit or not, he was aggressor in the beginning of the round to take the control of the fight from round one. And he even said that you have to control the fight from round one. You can't let Pacquiao get away and just do what he wants to do. Then the fight's going to run away from you because Pacquiao finds his range, and then you're in trouble. You haven't established anything. So obviously, there are a lot of nuances that I can't go into in detail that just you can't really explain it to fighters because different fighters have different styles and they do things differently. But the principle of it was that Floyd, because he dictated, he was able to make Pacquiao react to his feints, react to his punches, react to him instead of the other way around. That's what Mayweather did with Pacquiao. That's how he tamed that dude because Pacquiao is not an easy guy to fight, period. You can ask Keith Thurman. He's not an easy guy to fight. He's very, very quick. He's very, very fast. He's very, very explosive. But in order for you to control him, in order for you to regulate his punch output, you have to be able to feint him. Because Floyd was feinting Pacquiao, and Floyd was looking to land on Pacquiao, by the way. He wasn't just feinting him for feint's sake, but he was feinting him to see what he would do, and then he would go in and actually throw a punch. So, and because Pacquiao felt Floyd's power from round one, Floyd hit him with a sharp, sharp right hand in round one. The very first, Pacquiao thought he had foot position. He thought he had lead foot dominance, was coming in on a double jab, and Floyd just lit him up with a right hand. And after that, Pacquiao was like, okay. So Pacquiao was like, you know what? I need it. So he started biting on the feints, right? Floyd also hit him with another counter right hand, coming somewhere close to the end of the round. He hit him with a very hard counter right hand. And Pacquiao was like, okay, this guy can light me up. So you had to respect him. And once you get respect, now you can feint, you can, use your footwork. Because that's another thing. You see, a lot of people talk about the shoulder roll that Floyd has, right? The shoulder roll is something Floyd uses, but it's not his defense. His defense is not made up of the shoulder roll. His footwork is very important for people to know. You have to have footwork. And Floyd has very, very good footwork. Okay, whether it's in close or it is from a distance, he has great pivot work, particularly, and he can pivot 180 degrees, and which you could do something like that. That it's much, much. On a drop of a dime, like he really flawlessly does it. That's something where you can turn your opponent however which way you want. You can turn him into an angle. You could turn him into a shot. In fact, in the opening segments of the fight with Mayweather and Pacquiao, Mayweather turned him into the right hand. Pacquiao actually was turning. They were pivoting, and Floyd turned Pacquiao into the right hand and lit him up. Okay, so if you can't see those things, all right. So that's calculated fighters. That's what I'm trying to talk about. Calculated fighters. All right, they got the game plan. But on top of that, it's not bang. It's not brawl out because I'm not getting through. I stick with the game plan and will get results. For example, Floyd did not brawl out with Pacquiao when Pacquiao caught him with the counter left hand in the fourth round. He didn't brawl with him. He didn't start slugging it out with him because he got hit. No, what did he do? He covered up, and he covered up perfectly. And he waited for Pacquiao to waste out as much energy as possible before he attacked Pacquiao, where he attacked him with a lead right to the breadbasket, to the solar plexus. After Pacquiao drained out everything, that's where he went immediately. That's called calculated fighters. You're not going to attack the guy, go toe to toe like Sugar Ray Leonard. Even with Wilfredo Benitez, Benitez be head hunting Sugar Ray Leonard instead of going to the body. And that guy is much quicker than you. You know, Pacquiao was way faster than Floyd when it comes to combinations, right? Pacquiao throw it like a 8-punch combination, right? So what I do to limit that and make him hesitant to throw combinations because he knows he can get caught. What do? You hit him to the body and sharp punches to the body. Sharp punches to the body. The head is could be an elusive target. The head could be a hard nugget. You hit a guy in his head, and he probably nothing happens to him because he's got a tough head. But I don't care if he's a Mexican fighter. I don't care who he is. He could be Errol Lara. You start going to that breadbasket now, which is much more easier to hit. Might be at an angle though, so you mightn't be able to get clean shots. But you go to the breadbasket. Now you can break a fighter down. Now to go to the body means you have your head exposed. So you got to go to the body. And then you have to have an evasive maneuver, whether it's a pivot work, whether it's dipping under, whatever it is, snapping back, whatever it is, you need to have an evasive maneuver because going to the body is a risky endeavor, right? So what I'm trying to say is that it's easy to talk about the game plan, which is to break a guy down to the body. So, for example, Manny Pacquiao versus Errol Spence, all right? Now, Errol Spence is younger than Manny Pacquiao. He's younger. He's taller, physically bigger than Manny Pacquiao. He's a strong guy, and he's very successful. He's never tasted defeat. Don't know what it is in the pros, right? And he's been beating everybody. He's been successful so far. How does Manny Pacquiao, for example, beat a Errol Spence? Well, he better be a calculated fighter. If you're not a calculated fighter, you can't beat Errol Spence. You can't. It's not just about speed and quickness and no. Because he could tag your ass up and he could tear you up easy. If that's all you got, it's just speed and quickness. No, you have to be very calculated about what you're doing. You have to be very composed about what you're doing. You have to know what angles you're going to go at him with. And yes, you're going to use your explosiveness, you're going to use your speed, but you're not going to be using it all the time because you're much older. So you have to know how to pace yourself. You have to know how to, and veterans know this very, very well. You have to have good defense. Got to have good defense. That's what Sugar Ray Leonard lacked against Terry Norris. He didn't have good defense, so he was getting tagged up. Whether the defense is your feet and just simple, subtle movements with your feet or subtle movements with your upper body to make sure the guy's coming down the wrong line. So if Pacquiao can get Errol Spence to go down the wrong lines, he can counterpunch him much better and make the work easier for himself. Of course, Errol Spence is been looking to chop that tree down because he's saying this guy's old. No matter what facade y'all see, if I hit him a couple times to the body, I'm going to tire his ass out. And I'm going to tear him up, right? Errol Spence might be thinking like that. And Pacquiao, though, he got good defense. When he covers up his big arms, cover his entire little body. So, Pacquiao is a problem. But 2 points. First thing is, who's going to dictate the fight? If Errol Spence allows Pacquiao to dictate the fight, that fight is lost. He's not going to win. Okay? But if Pacquiao allows Errol Spence to dictate the fight, and there are ways for Errol Spence to dictate the fight, because remember, he has a reach advantage, even though Pacquiao has been able to get past almost everybody's reach advantage, and he does it in very tricky, subtle ways. He gets a guy's confidence up, and the guy's hitting him, or seemingly hitting him, he just barely hitting him or whatever, and Pacquiao's baiting that dude. He's setting a trap for him. And that's the difference between Floyd and all these other guys. Floyd would not bite the bait. Floyd will hit you with a jab, and then he will feint as if he's going to hit you with a jab to see what you're going to do. and he's gonna keep on walking your ass down. But he's very strategic in feints and throwing punches, so you don't know when he's gonna throw. You don't know what he's gonna throw. That's the way how Floyd would maneuver Pacquiao. Pacquiao, on the other hand, is explosive. He's very quick. And because he's so short, he has to double and triple up his jab. So he comes in off a double jab or triple jab. He doesn't stutter step or none of that anymore. He doesn't leap in the air anymore, which is good, because guys like Roy Jones Jr. and Pacquiao, they got away with their athleticism. Roy Jones Jr. would leap in the air with a leaping left hook, right? And he delayed the left hook like what he did to James Toney, then catch him with the left hook, right? In the meantime, he opened for a counter. If James Toney just pivoted, and then countered, he'd have knocked Roy the fuck out. But he did not do that. So he did. So my point anyway is that the explosiveness and the quickness of these guys, they get away with some stuff. And whether Pacquiao loses a step or not, the principle that's involved is keep his composure and be very calculated. And if Pacquiao can be a calculated fighter, which, I mean, he's more of a busy fighter than he's a calculated fighter. He's still setting you up, don't get me wrong. But Errol Spence will have to look for the traps that Pacquiao would set, because Pacquiao sets traps. Pacquiao's a tricky dude, man. He sets traps. Okay, if you underestimate Pacquiao like Keith Thurman did, you won't get your ass beat. You cannot underestimate him. You cannot take him for granted. Errol Spence is really well-grounded, well-schooled fighter. I don't think he will. Well, let's see who controls the fight. But the idea is, again, you have to be a calculated fighter. And this goes for before the fights. Now, that's something that I noticed, I heard, was Errol drinks alcohol. He's a drinker or whatever. If that's the case, Pacquiao might beat his ass, because you can't be going in there subpar shape. Okay? I don't care if you're 31, 32 years old. You can't be drinking. You can't be a rummy. You can't be a druggie, and another guy's a clean boxer, and you won't beat them. It doesn't work like that. That's why Pacquiao lasts so long in the sport of boxing. He used to drink and smoke and all of that stuff, but he put Pacquiao gonna have he got a lot of oomph all the way down the stretch, and even if he doesn't, he knows how to compensate for that and catch his wind back, because he's got a certain degree of defense. The only time you really catch Pacquiao is not when he's on the back foot. It's mostly when he's on the front foot attacking you. That's when you can counter him, you know. But for the most part, Pacquiao's not a dude when he's on the defensive end of the spectrum that is easy to hit. He's not easy to hit, okay? So the point being, anyway, is that you must be calculated in boxing, really calculated in boxing. And the guys, the really top tier guys in boxing are calculated fighters. All right. So please don't embarrass people by saying, just because Andre Ward is a very humble guy, don't get it twisted. If he had to go in the ring against Roy Jones Jr. in Roy Jones Jr. prime, he gonna prepare for that motherfucker. He would prepare for that motherfucker. He would be well prepared for that motherfucker. And he would be calculating how he would break that guy down. Again, Speedy Gonzalez, what do you do with Speedy guys? You break them down to the body. They're going to slow down. I don't care how well in shape and how well in fit. We saw Errol Lara slow down. We saw him slip in the corner when Canelo kept on landing them bombs to the body. Canelo busted up his eye because he was getting to him at first. For the first 4 rounds, couldn't get to him. You know, you got to ride the storm. You got to weather the storm. You got to have good defense. The key is defense here. You got good defense, and them guys like Roy and all them other guys, I think of Nassim Hamed and all them guys, you can withstand the storm that they come with, because you're not looking to throw 5-6 punch combinations. You're not just going to open up and get hit with any old shot. You're going to use your defense, work behind your defense to deal with these guys. You're not as fast as them and stuff, but you're very you're very calculated in what you're going to land on them, what you're going to do to them, how you want them to respond to you, because you want to dictate. You don't want them dictating. You want to dictate. And sometimes you got to wait a little bit down the stretch. You got to have a little bit of patience and composure. Keep your composure and dictate. And I think that's the difference between like how we understand boxing today versus boxing back in the day. Back in the day, boxing was about how strong you was, how vicious you could be, how much you could knock this guy out, right? And Today, boxing's a lot more calculated. It's a lot more calculated. The guy's not necessarily as skilled as the guys back then, or know as much skills or whatever. But again, you could have a guy. I think Roy Jones Jr. even he spoke about this. You could have a guy that's well conditioned. He don't have the boxing IQ that you have, but he well conditioned. He can outlast you. All of that's part of the game plan. If a guy can outlast you in a fight, then he could beat your ass up. Especially if he's doing the right things. He's trying to bully you. He's trying to rough you up. Maybe he can't hit you to the body. I always remember Sugar Ray Robinson versus um uh um the 175 pounder. I forgot what his name is right now. I always remember that because I watched the fight and he was going to Sugar Ray Robinson's body all the time, and he was pushing, he's putting his weight down on him, he was hugging and clinching him and tiring him out. Guys, when a guy is much better than you as a boxer, you got to find ways and means to beat him. You have to be calculated. You got to have a game plan to beat a guy like that. And this is what I'm trying to tell you guys. So a lot of people talk about, Sugar Ray Robinson and he was the greatest, but I'm like, fuck no. He got beat by Joey. What's the guy's name? Shit, I can't remember his name for some reason. He got beat trying to go for the light heavyweight championship of the world. But if he fought smart, you got to fight smart. See, if he had fought smart, he'd have beaten the guy just based off of the following: he was faster, he was quicker, he had better footwork. So what do you do with a big guy like that? You don't let him back you up in a corner. You don't let him box you out. You don't let him cut off the ring. And you peck away at him. You chip away at him. Round by round, you chip away at him. But Sugar Ray Robinson was trying to land all kinds of combinations and dominate the dude, and he was just wasting fucking energy. So he burned out, and Joey, he kept on going. You know what I'm saying? He kept on going. And that's how he beat him, because he was more calculated. He was a calculated fighter. He had a game plan. The game plan was to tire out Sugar Ray Robinson so that they could crash his ass and knock him out. Because there ain't no way he was matching him for speed. There was no way he was matching him for quickness. And there was no way he was matching him, for the abilities that he had. But and even his ring IQ probably was superior to him. But what he did have was a game plan. And he thought he could outsmart him. Juan Manuel Marquez and Manny Pacquiao. Juan Manuel Marquez is nowhere in the league of the athleticism of Pacquiao. Pacquiao is much more athletic. Marquez is not as skilled as Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao's got a much more wider array of offensive skills than what Marquez has. So how did Marquez knock out Pacquiao? He outsmarted him. He had a game plan. He was calculated. He understood what Pacquiao does and the mistakes that Pacquiao makes. You got to be calculated, ladies and gentlemen. I always tell people the road is not for the swift. The road is for the dedicated, the hard worker, the intentional person with a game plan and sees what they need to do. Floyd, of all people, I keep on mentioning him a lot, showed us that. He had a game plan. He knew when he went into boxing professionally what he wanted to do. Now the question was, how did he accomplish that? How do you get to that point? And along the way, he found people who showed him along the way what to do to be able to master this game called boxing. He had the biggest game plan of them all. He had a game plan for how he was going to navigate through boxing, and he also had a game plan. And this is something he knew he started working on before he even got into the pros, right? And the other thing is, not only did he have a game plan as to what he wanted to do in boxing and how he wanted to make money and how he wanted to do, but also he had a game plan always for the fights. And yes, his uncle, his coach, his trainer came up with the game plans. But the point is, he also prepared himself. Andre Ward, same kind of guy. Didn't make the money that Floyd made, but he had a game plan. They had a game plan how they wanted to go into boxing, how they wanted to do things. Not just about being undefeated, but beating everybody in front of them in the pros. Continue what they were doing in the amateurs, beating ass, and finding a way always to beat an ass. That's what I'm talking about. And that's calculated. Okay, these are not people that just came into the sport and just be in there kind of drifting around, very gifted and stuff, but drifting around. No. So I thought I would contribute to the boxing community by talking about calculated fighters because it's something, you know, I've been listening to people in boxing. I've been listening to people, you know, who are professionals in boxing, people who box and all of that stuff, and I really appreciate them. But it's something that sometimes I feel like people in boxing themselves miss the boat on. Like they're not able to because I guess they're affiliated with their time and their era and whatever, and they feel everything goes downhill. It's kind of like with everything else. Oh yeah, the music of this time is terrible. No, you like the music of your time. You relate to the music of your time. Now the music of this time is different, and you don't relate. And I think some people, when they can mature themselves sufficiently to realize that we have different eras and different times, and they all had their positives to them, and some of the things from those times are gone now, but everything had its perks. But it's not like things have gone backwards, like everybody's talking about. Things have evolved, and they actually become better. And it's that kind of thing that I think a lot of people don't understand because when I start talking about calculated making calculated moves and being calculated. Okay, so let me give you guys an example of the calculations and how people are moving around boxes now, which a lot of people, it rubs them the wrong way, right? Hold on one second. I'm going to come back. Oh, I can't cut the video on this. Okay. Right. So calculated decisions, calculated moves, right? So I said I was going to give you an example of uh, 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 um, something. I can't remember what it is. My train of thought's kind of gone, but nonetheless, my point is you got to think about that because that's one of the aspects of the sport of boxing. I think that's overlooked quite a lot. Everybody wants to talk about how entertaining somebody can be, and that's awesome too. Depends on what you think entertainment is. But I think that the point that a lot of people miss out on is not just the entertainment of boxing, but it's also what is what actually works, what is effective in boxing. So, oh yes, I remember now. So, calculated moves and how sometimes it seems very negative. It's like, think about this. You watch it how Mayweather is moving along Javante Tank Davis. I myself, I'm not very impressed with it, right? Tank is going to be facing somebody called Mario Barrios, okay? This is a dude that obviously was supposed to face Reggie Sprogray. He was supposed to fight. Mario Barrios had the title. He was supposed to fight Reggie Sprogray to defend his title, right? It's not a real title, okay? It's like a paper champion title. The real champion at 140 is right now is Josh Taylor, right? He's the guy that beat Jose Ramirez. But the thing about it is, it's a paper championship. It's not the real championship. But yet Tank, Floyd is working a model where Tank will make much money, and there will be a lot of noise behind this. And the gimmick is that Tank is going up 2 weight classes to face a guy that, again, we'll give him good competition, but somebody who, it's very likely or it's possible he could beat the guy. More than trying to face, say, for example, Josh Taylor right now. Go up against Josh Taylor to become undisputed, which would be really awesome, right? But the thing about it is, a lot of people will look at that and critique it because they will say, But look, this dude, you know, uh, this dude is not facing Teofimo Lopez. He's not facing guys at lightweight, that we really want to see him face. Oh, how about a Ryan Garcia versus Tank? Ryan Garcia always asking for Tank. A Devin Haney versus Tank. A Lomachenko versus Tank. And I understand that. I actually can vibe with that because I see how they can be saying, well, look, man, this dude ain't facing the guys we want to see him face. He facing some guy that just out of left field, just like that. You know what I'm saying? But it's a calculated move nonetheless. It's a calculated move. You know what I mean? No, this is a little too long. That's so interesting. It's a calculated move in boxing. Now, so there are times when calculated moves, you ask yourself, what on earth are they doing? Right? So there are times when calculated moves can be negative. Because I can see how it helps Tank's career, but he's not facing nobody. Who the hell is Mario Barrios? Not even a real world champion, you know what I mean? Tank won a title against Yurikas Gamboa at lightweight, but it's not a real world title either. Teofimo Lopez got the real titles and Devin Haney. And so this is where sometimes being calculated don't work. The calculation here is really about making the most amount of money. It's not really about even facing top tier guys anymore. And to me, that model is not the model that I agree with. So I want to make a little clarification in saying that when you look at Floyd's career, when you look at Andre Ward's career, even when you look at Canelo's career, to some degree, and I mean, I saw what Demetrius Andrade said about Canelo being a coward and the fact that he's ducking him. Been ducking him since 154. I saw it on the Zone, and I hope that sets up a Canelo versus Demetrius Andrade, and we know what's going to happen, but when is the question, right? It pretty much is building, right? But I just think that, again, calculated moves, calculated decisions is what you see in boxing today. Even with Canelo, even though you don't agree with all his calculated moves and calculated decisions, it's calculated. Now, I would prefer if you calculated, but you're trying to make fights happen. You're trying to make the big fights happen, the fights that people think are a real threat. And I know it might take a while to happen, but still, you should be, sort of interested in that. Apparently, Canelo is interested in Caleb Plant. That is a good fight. That is a good fight, and that's a dangerous fight in a lot of ways because Caleb Plant is going to be more dangerous than Billy Joe Saunders was. And the only reason I say that is because I thought Billy Joe Saunders is more skilled than all of them in the division. But what Billy Joe Saunders did not do was go in there with the confidence, believing that he, from the opening bell, that he could beat Canelo. And he never took the initiative in the first round. In the first round, Canelo was going to the body easy, real easy, sneaking those punches to the body. And Canelo sneaks punches to the body. He steals punches. He's a tricky customer. So, and Canelo, of course, is very calculated, right? He's very calculated in his movements, he and his trainer, and I got to give him props for that. But again, I would love to see Canelo versus Demetrius Andrade. I would love to see Canelo versus Jamal Charlo. Those guys been around since 154. Why are you not facing them? You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm saying. I'm not going to go as far as to say, oh, he's Frankelman ducking them and he will never face them ever in his career. I'm not going to go that far. All right, he is ducking Demetrius Andrade right now. But if he faces Demetrius Andrade, then all is good. Because the longer he takes to face Demetrius Andrade ain't going to he's not going to go out of his prime for a good minute. The longer he takes to face Demetrius Andrade, I think the more anticipated that fight will be and the bigger that fight will be. If Canelo doesn't lose, I mean, he could lose to somebody and then that'll be that. And Andrade probably won't lose for a good minute because Andrade ain't lost since God knows when. He's another like an Andre Ward kind of guy. He ain't lost since way back in the amateurs. So Andre is a very special fighter. If anybody don't realize that, but you better realize it. So I would love to see Canelo versus Demetrius Andrade. And Andre got so many varied skills. He can fight on the inside, can fight on the outside, can fight at mid-range. He's that kind of guy. He's not to the level of development as a Floyd Mayweather. Not even Danny Jacobs. Danny Jacobs is much more seasoned than him, but he's sharper than Danny Jacobs. You know what I mean? He's sharper. He's a sharper fighter than Danny Jacobs. He's a taller fighter, I think, than Danny Jacobs is as well. And he's longer, I think. So he would give any fighter problems, lots of problems. Okay, I think Canelo would still eke it out and beat him, but it's a fight I would love to see. That's a fight I would love to see. Dimitri Bevo versus Canelo Alvarez. I would also love to see Caleb Plant versus Canelo Alvarez. So I'm getting that. I'm getting my wish with the Caleb Plant thing. I just think that he should have faced Dimitri Bevo before Caleb Plant. But hey, he's trying to get undisputed. Whatever. Let's go. You know what I'm saying? But I want to see if Canelo will face Dimitri Bevo. Hopefully, Dimitri Bevo can land a marquee fight. He needs to get a marquee fight, and nobody's really eager to face him. I would love to see Andre versus Triple G, for example. Seeing that was the guy that Canelo faced. I'm just telling you what I would like to see. I don't know how possible it is. You know what I mean? But Andre versus, say, for example, Demetrius Andre, or Andre versus Charlo. I was hearing talk about that, but again, it's just this. See, I don't really talk much about boxing these days because there ain't much to talk about. You know, if guys are setting up fights, I mean, I'm glad that Pacquiao's facing Errol Spence. That's a good fight. I was hearing people talking about, oh, you know, Errol Spence, he don't want to face Terrence Crawford, but he gonna face Pacquiao. And I'm like, but wasn't Terrence Crawford trying to face Pacquiao? I mean, what's up with y'all? So who wouldn't want to face Manny Pacquiao? Who would turn that fight down? You know what I'm saying? Who in their right mind would turn down a fight with Manny? Y'all smoking. Ain't nobody gonna turn down a Pacquiao fight. Pacquiao is the second cash cow of boxing. He's the guy that makes it rain. Pacquiao be raking in 25 mil per fight. Okay, why? Because he carries pay-per-view. You say Manny Pacquiao, you're talking, I mean, come on now. I mean, this ain't rocket science, right? The two cash cows of boxing that have been around for God knows how long is Pacquiao and Mayweather. Mayweather doing an exhibition. That's going to be sold out. That's pay-per-view, right? He going to sell out an exhibition. Pacquiao can do an exhibition tomorrow. He going to sell that out too, okay? And pay-per-view will be off the charts. These are legends of the sport. Why would I, if I was a young boxer, why wouldn't I want to face a legend of the sport? Why wouldn't I want to face Pacquiao? Of course I would face Pacquiao over Dennis Ugas or any one of them other young guns. Of course. Does a lot for my legacy. Does a lot for my career. Win, lose, or draw. Pacquiao is one of the greatest boxers of all time, people. Wake up. And the fact that he's facing Errol Spence at this point in his career, god damn, man. You got to give that man props. Period. You know, if Floyd was to come back and face Errol Spence, for example, y'all would give Floyd props. You know what I mean? This is not something normal. You know, I was listening to, who was it? Jeff Mayweather. Shout out to Jeff Mayweather, by the way. Jeff Mayweather, man. You putting it in there? I don't see none. Oh, hold on a second. No, I don't think I put any in. Okay. All right. So I use black pepper. I'm cooking, by the way, if you guys haven't realized. I use black pepper. That's black pepper right there. And then I use something called saffron, what you guys know as turmeric. And I'm putting it in my food. I'm actually cooking something here. Put a little turmeric in there. So what those things do is they prevent inflammation, and they're also good for boosting your immune system. And here's another thing I throw in there. I think I talked to you guys about this before, but nonetheless, black seed oil. It's really good. It's really good for you. Black seed oil. And I also use this selenium. It's real good. When you use a lot of protein, you're using a lot of protein in your diet, this metabolizes the protein right. So instead of your proteins being used, say, to make a tumor or make cancers and stuff, instead this. And I am 46 years old, ladies and gentlemen. I'm like a fossil. I'm an old dude. I'm still training though, and I'm still in shape. To some degree, I haven't trained in a while though, but I'm still in training. You can see I put on size and everything. Because you watch my cheeks there. I put on some weight. I'm probably what, right, 175, 176 probably right now. But I feel really good and I feel relatively healthy. And the point behind it anyway is I like to talk boxing. So I'm talking boxing with you guys. You getting it from me. You get it from me. So I heard Jeff Mayweather say, he said that yeah. Hold on a second. Right. Jeff Mayweather, he was saying that he didn't think, he said if Pacquiao was to beat Errol Spence, well, anyway, he's one of the greatest fighters of all time, and he said that Pacquiao, he thinks Errol Spence will beat Pacquiao, which, again, I could see what he's saying. Trust me, I can see it. Um, and some people they're saying, but what I disagreed with Jeff Mayweather about, um, because he was giving his thoughts on the fight, and he was saying that he said that Pacquiao it was accomplishing nothing new. There was nothing new that Pacquiao was doing that wasn't done before. And I'm gonna show you guys how much Pacquiao has done something that has not been done before. The first thing is, when it comes to welterweights, Pacquiao is the oldest welterweight champion. Okay, he's the oldest welterweight to become champion. That's saying a lot because it shows, especially in the lower weight classes, guys kind of age pretty fast. It shows how good this guy is. Now, if he were to win, he would have beat Errol Spence at the age of 43. Okay, he'd be 43. He would become the oldest welterweight. He'd break his own record. He'd be the oldest welterweight again of all time, right? Now, on top of that, so that's something that's never been done before. The other thing is, he'd have done it twice. Okay, he'd be stripped and he'd done it twice. And this time, he would be the unified WBA IBF champion. He'd be unified champion. Now, of course, you had Bernard Hopkins did this, and we had George Foreman do this into other weight classes. People have done it before, but not at welterweight. So that's where he would be making history once again, and he would be unified champion. And I can't remember if Pacquiao was ever a unified champion. That's an interesting thing. Fowler's undisputed, right? And here's the other thing. This is the same Pacquiao that people said he's done for. Floyd faced the old Pacquiao. He was past his prime. So just imagine if this Pacquiao beats a prime Errol Spence, what that says about Pacquiao and also about Pacquiao when he faced Floyd. That's why I said it's all about being a calculated fighter. A calculated fighter doesn't need a trainer to give him the basics. A calculated fighter already knows all of that. All he needs is the trainer to have a second pair of eyes to observe things on the outside. I remember Floyd was fighting Pacquiao, and his father kept on saying, "Man, they're gonna take this fight from you." And Floyd wasn't listening to him; he was listening to I forgot what the name of the guy is, the big, strapping guy that was also a boxer, who Floyd took on and teaches him balance and stuff. He was talking to him and telling him what to do, and Floyd was listening to that guy, and he was just there, because Floyd listened, Floyd, And I'm just saying, when you're a calculated fighter, you know what you need to do in the ring. The thing about it is, it's nice to have an extra set of eyes to show you something that you might not have seen. And I try to explain to people that it's much of a thinking man's sport. It's a thinking man's sport, not in the usual way how you think of thinking. It's not like they're thinking about things in the ring. They already know what they're about to do, what they need to do, and now they're just kind of observing and so on to be able to execute it, right? in the ring. But the point is, it's a thinking man's sport. Take for example, Andre Ward. He knew what he did wrong. Why he got dropped by Sergey Kovalev. He didn't need Virgil Hunter to tell him that. He knew what he did wrong. And that's the cool thing about boxing. You know, the cool thing about boxing is when you know the sport of boxing, you know where you went wrong and you can correct it. But if you fight after fight, you're doing the same shit, then you haven't grown and you haven't realized your mistake and you haven't been able to grow from it. I've seen fighters get caught with the same goddamn shot time and time again in their careers because they didn't grow. They didn't learn from their mistake. They were able to cover up their mistake long enough before they fall for it again. So you have to be able to work on your craft, know what you're capable of doing, know how to work on your defense, because you got to work on your defense. You can't be, this is the thing about people. They always underestimate, a lot of fighters and a lot of people underestimate defense. The first thing you should be working on in boxing is your footwork. That's your first line of defense. It's your feet. Not your hands. Your feet. If you don't have a proper stance, if you can't even squat properly, you can't sit into your stance properly, at some point that will be exposed. You have to have the proper foundation. And it starts with your feet. Right? So, it's all these things that, and I listen to people talk about shoulder roll. Fuck the shoulder. Nobody gives a damn about the shoulder. It's your feet. It's where you are in space. Where do you put yourself in space? Where is your body angled in space? It's chess, not checkers, man. And that's what Floyd, Ward, Canelo, that's what they work on. They work on that stance, basics, stance, placing their punches, defense. Because they're calculated fighters. If they can weather any storm because they got the defense for it, they obviously can win the fights. Because now they have to look for the openings. When a guy's offloaded all his stuff, offloaded all his shit, you give him maybe one or two punches to come in, then you thread him in with a nice solid one to the solar plexus, or to the liver, or to the spleen. You occupy him up top, and then you clip him down below. You can chop down a tree. You got 12 rounds. Just imagine if these guys had 15 rounds, they probably had more stoppages. What do you think what did Julio Chavez do? What was he known for? Body punching. Attacking the body. He wasn't the quickest guy. He wasn't the sharpest guy in the world. But he relentlessly went to the body. But what do you do to keep off a guy who's a body puncher? What do you do to deter somebody who likes to go to the body? If you're going to the body, you better be smart about it, because it's easy to get headshots in. And you take the available shot there. So if the guy is going to your body, somehow you managed to compromise that in your defense, and he went to your body and he hit you to the body, you need to counter up top to the head. You can uppercut him, or you can sharpshoot him. You can sharpshoot him to the head. So the trick in boxing is to mix it up. You understand? You have to mix it up in boxing. If a guy's coming at you to take your body out, you better snipe his ass up. Let him know you need to respect range. Start hitting him with headshots. You know what I'm saying? So that's boxing. So I want to talk a little bit about calculated fighters. And a lot of people think calculated fighters is all about attacking the head and attacking this and that. That's another thing. Before the fight even begins, man, before the fight even begins, you got to be calculated. You got to be making calculated moves. A lot of people don't make calculated moves, man. You know, you have to know how you approaching your opponent, how you approaching the fight, even before the fight begins. How you gonna make the fight happen? You know, you have to be calculated. If you're your own boss, it's much easier. When Floyd was his own boss, Andre Ward was working for somebody, so he had to wait till the fight was made. Once the fight was made, then he could be calculated. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to leave that with some people. Canelo is his own boss as well, so he can be as calculated as he wants to be. You know what I mean? But it's all about being calculated. It's all about being calculated, and they don't talk about that enough. Yeah, guys used to confront each other and they mean mug each other, and they still do that to this day. You know, guys would have game plans, how they're gonna approach a guy or whatever. But besides all of that, the preparation before all that, the preparation and the growth and the calculated way in which you expand your game. Expand your game. That's what I mean by calculated. And that's the hard work. That's putting in the hard work. All work is easy work, but the hard work, months and years of expanding your game, expanding and doing things that are uncomfortable for you to do. That is the non-flattering part. And they don't talk much about that. And that calculated fighter will do things that he realizes the other fighter is deficient in. Wants that fighter to resort to something that they don't know, not play to their strengths. And that kind of boxing we have not seen like until very, very recently. The recent, 2 decades ago. That kind of boxing we've never seen. And yeah, they will tell you, well, we're trying to make the opponent result. Nah, y'all trying to kill each other. Y'all trying to fight each other. Yes, you're trying to have an edge. Yes, you're still using boxing and boxing science to draw a guy in, etc. But you're still playing checkers. You're not looking 4 or 5 rounds down the road. You're not looking 3, 4 rounds down the road at how you're going to execute your game plan. You're not setting up feints in a certain sort of way. And guys do set up guys to get knocked out, don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying that you still have to be calculating how you approach things. And there have been chess matches. I know I've seen black and white film. I've seen what people have done and how they accomplished and etc. But on the level that I'm speaking about, no. So yeah, that's what separates Andre Ward, a Floyd Mayweather, a Canelo Alvarez from other fighters, and that's the guys of this era. You know what I mean? I've seen remarkable fighters, I've seen tremendous fighters, I've seen great fighters, but at the end of the day, the science, the sweet science is done on a whole other level. And some of it is not positive. Some of it is negative. Like, how Tank is being paired up and matched up. It's kind of negative. It's not what I mean by negative, not negative in the sense of, it's bad for boxing. It's not bad for boxing. But we're not seeing the best facing the best. Tank is not facing the best, right? It seems as though he's skirting around, trying to face these guys at 135. He ain't faced one single 135 pounder, and that's the hot division right there. Right? Devin Haney be calling out everybody. He ain't getting nobody. He's gonna get Jorge Linares this coming weekend, and we'll see how he performs against him. I think he's just gonna dust Jorge Linares out and move on. But the point is, I want to see the best face the best. Of course, you can't always get what you want. I understand that with boxing. You got to build things and whatever. But at the end of the day, to see Tank jumping up two weight classes, then down, and he jumping all around, exploring, like it seems as though they're exploring the different weight classes and how Tank performed in each given weight class. That's what it seems to me. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But I'd love to see Tank face another skilled, talented young fighter. That's what we want to see, or Lomachenko or something. You know what I mean? So sometimes being calculated, depending on what your goals are, is not necessarily the way to go. And it's nice to see, um, Josh Taylor versus Jose Ramirez, for example, and younger fighters go at it. You know what I mean? But I've talked more than my share on boxing. It's 1 hour and 10 minutes, 30 whatever seconds. I talk a good amount of boxing here with you guys. So if you don't see me again for a good minute, you know why. There's nothing really exciting me on the horizon with boxing except for Canelo. Sorry, not Canelo. Pacquiao versus Errol Spence. That's probably the most exciting thing for me I see in boxing. The other stuff don't excite me. I'll still talk about them, but they don't excite me as much. I mean, Jorge Linares versus Devin Haney. That should be a good fight. But again, it won't excite you because Jorge Linares ain't fought a high profile fight in a long time, and the last time he did, he lost to Lomachenko. So, it doesn't have the luster that it would, but it's still a name in boxing. I'd like to see how he performs against that name. So, and he was stopped by Lomachenko, I think. So, yeah. At least Devin Haney getting Jorge Linares would be good. And Jorge Linares looks like he's in shape and everything, so it should be good. A good fight. Yeah. But I just wanted to talk to you guys about calculated fighters and people who constantly grow as fighters, show us new things every single fight. That's the kind of way how boxing. For now, I'm gonna catch you guys later. I am what you need in the building. You know, um, I'm gonna catch you guys later. Peace. I'm out.